Hey everybody, it's episode 4 of series 2 of UIO, the podcast for teen girls. Hugs to everyone, and thank you for joining UIO, the podcast for teen girls. It is for you and about you inside out. I am Sonja Lewis, your host. Today we're talking about dating, a normal part of teenage life. Yet a minefield of questions can stymie even the most outgoing person. From bewilderment about an intense attraction to questioning who you are actually attracted to, dating is a complex topic. But isn't it supposed to be fun? Absolutely. Let's get to the fun of it with our special guest, Kat Williams, a relationship counselor, coach, writer, speaker, trainer, and author of the groundbreaking Stay Calm and Content No Matter What Life Throws at You. Kat will help us put it all into perspective. Welcome, Kat. Kat, thanks so much for being our guest and talking to us about this really important subject. Though dating is a normal part of growing up and it's meant to be fun and offers so many endless opportunities and lessons in life for teenagers, dating can be awkward and obscured with the complexities of expectations, peer pressure, and dealing with a mound of contemporary issues. Suddenly, you're faced with having a special relationship with another person, posing questions about respect, trust, and so on. And then there's sexuality and even sex, whether you're ready for it or not. Much has been said about preparing youth for dating. We all know the old idioms, the birds and the bees, but what is dating really about? There are loads of issues, from gender issues, sexuality, bullying, safety, establishing boundaries, and so on. I think the first thing I'd love to know, Kat, it just seems like maybe the conversations that we have about dating are a bit outdated. Are there new conversations? What conversations should parents and guardians be having with their teen girls nowadays?
Yes, this is a really interesting question that I've actually, knowing that I was coming on the podcast, I've been having some conversations with some of the teenage girls that I work with and speak to, and they're actually saying that really, just as it might have been in our day, it's a very uncomfortable conversation to try and have with parents, and that hasn't got any easier. And they did kind of very clearly sort of say, I'm not sure there's a way that our parents can ever really have that conversation in a way that we're going to be very comfortable with. So interestingly, from the parents' perspective, when I've talked to them, they're saying, but there are things that we really feel we may need to say, that might be important about boundaries or about not getting too serious too quickly, about being safe. And kind of what that means is that as parents, there are things that we feel we want to say because of our own experiences.
Does having a close relationship, for example, or a good relationship with a parent or maybe an auntie or somebody in your life, does that make it easier?
Yes, and I think that's one of the things that has come through strongly is that if you don't feel that that's really going to be that helpful with a parent, then there are other people. There may be an older sister, an auntie, a cousin. I mean, something that thinking about coming on today made me remember that I'm actually 16 years older than my cousin, who's 16 years older than my daughter. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, I had this need. I sent her a message on her 16th birthday, and I just said, I'd like to be here for you. If there's any questions you feel you can't talk to about with your parents, even though they're lovely, open, very loving, accepting parents, I just felt I wanted to offer her that. And she replied and said, thank you so much. I'll let you know. I think I'm okay. And I kind of said to her, please, when my daughter's 16, would you offer her the same thing? Because she may not want to talk to me, but I trust you. You're in our family, and I'd love her to be able to reach out to you if she needs to.
Yeah, that's really a good approach, to know that there's someone around. This sort of leads to the question about an appropriate age. When I was a teen girl, I don't remember even mouthing the word boyfriend or, talking about dating until 16, at least at home. I couldn't have visits from boys, and they had to be out by a certain time. It was very, very strict. I didn't go out on dates at least until I was 16. And I'm sure the teenage girls today are probably really feeling for me, but don't worry, I did survive.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, I can see my parents were trying to protect me, hoping I would be mature enough at some point to handle dating. And I think the question for you, Kat, is there a magic age?
I suppose the short answer is, I guess there can never be a magic age, because it is going to depend on the maturity of the teenager. And that can depend on a variety of factors. I suppose I'm thinking, for example, somebody with 3 older sisters that has seen them go through the dating experience may feel very differently at the age of 14 or 15 or 16 than the oldest sister felt. And that can just be a change in, the order of the siblings that has a very different environment. So that would just be one example of someone that might feel more ready than others. But what I kind of feel in the original part of what you were asking in the question is, for me, our decisions boil down at the end of the day to kind of a love decision based on positivity and kind of, what we're going to gain from the date versus the fears that our parents, as you've said yourself, that was a fear of your parents trying to keep you safe, which is completely understandable. But really, as we progress through life and as we grow up and as we face all of the challenges, we will always have to make our decisions based on what am I positive about, what am I going to enjoy versus what am I afraid of. And that has to be an individual feeling almost of, how am I going to make this decision?
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, talk to us about some of the things that teen girls can learn from dating.
I would say it's a gradual learning about ourselves. It's stepping into the freedom of stepping away from your peers and building a relationship with one other person that's outside of your family, outside of your peer group, and you get a chance to try out kind of learning about yourself and about them and having a different set of experiences, different types of conversations, I think.
Yeah, I think that's really good, because so many times when you're in a familiar situation, you don't learn as much about yourself. You become a very specific person. My parents know me as this person. My sisters and brothers know me as this person. My friends know me as this person. But when you enter another realm, you do get to learn a lot more about yourself. But it does raise some very intense questions and concerning questions for the teenage girl herself. When she gets into a relationship, questions begin to come up about the intense emotional feelings, and so forth and so on. And in my first podcast series, I did a podcast specifically on sex and sexuality, which we'll get to talk about later. But first, I want to talk about the value of relationships. So many of us think dating is a means to an end, and our guest on the podcast was Rachel Gardner. And Rachel made the point that it really isn't. And I just would like your take on this, to talk to us about why it's important to understand relating to someone instead of seeing dating as an end goal. I've got a boyfriend now or a girlfriend.
And again, I've sort of 2 words are in my mind, and one of them is about, firstly, I was thinking about expectations. And so interesting, when you're saying that you're dating or you become a girlfriend or a boyfriend, the way to try to navigate how we feel as individuals is to almost make a decision for ourselves what that label means. Because as a relationship counsellor, often talk about with people is we have a series of labels. So like you just said, within your family, you might be the youngest daughter, you might be the eldest daughter, you might be the only daughter.
Yes.
You're also a cousin, a sister, a friend. So in this new world of dating, you have a new label, but only we, based on kind of our all of the resources maybe available to us, we need to decide what the expectations are attached to that word. It isn't society that says a girlfriend and a boyfriend should be doing this or feeling this way, or there is no rule book.
Yeah, I think that's really good, because making friends of the same and opposite sex while young is so important to learning to get along with others, to relate, to tolerate other opinions, other ways of life, without the filter of looking for a life partner. Talk to us about why it might be unrealistic to seek the perfect person.
It really comes down to all those influences around our expectations and our fears. That as human beings, our first sort of emotional need is certainty. When we think about it, we want to be safe. We want to know that we're going to eat today. We need those certainties of warmth and security and that kind of thing. And that's a really strong driver for us. So when we have around relationships, it's sort of like the holy grail almost is certainty. Wouldn't it be lovely to know that there's one person out there and you're going to find them, and when you find them, everything is going to be the happy ending? So in our kind of deepest soul almost, it's kind of like, oh yeah, please let that happen to me, and that is a very kind of, maybe it will. So then we sort of aim for that as a kind of, maybe I'll be the lucky one. And I think that's part of if you do find that relationship in your teenage years, probably part of us would say, it would be great if I never had to look again. That would kind of be nice. And I suppose one of the things I want people to think about while they're listening to this is that the world is a rainbow of we're all very diverse, we're all very different, and it may not happen that we can have that certainty, and that's and maybe that's okay. Maybe it's not easy, but it is okay.
People go through sometimes sort of different relationships, and I think that's why this concept of dating being an end goal, I think if you just focused on, I'm going to find that one person and that's it, you put everything into that and you're shattered.
Yes. Well, and that's really the point I come to an awful lot with people is that's all about our self-worth and our self-esteem, and that's where the fear decision can come from. And I'm often use an analogy of an arch with couples, that the sort of foundations, if you imagine a pillar, almost like a Grecian arch or something, the foundations of the pillars are our kind of past and how we feel about ourselves and how securely we've been attached within our own families and those relationships, which are our first relationships. And then that translates into how strong we are kind of in our own confidence and our own self-worth. Because if we get into a relationship where we need that relationship in order to feel okay about ourselves, then that's what I will often see, that when that breaks down, whether that's I don't particularly like the BFF, the best friend thing that teenagers or any child of any age might say, because it's almost like you're saying, I'm okay because my best friend likes me. I'm okay because I have a best friend. And it can be the same thing with relationships. So I will go in the workshops and talks that I do. I kind of say, look, I'm sorry, but I believe in good friends. We can be a good friend to everyone. It's I'm okay, you're okay. We're all equal, but we're all different. So I don't want anyone to say, I'm okay because they love me. Like, well, no, we need to be our own best friend. You're okay because you are who you are.
Yeah.
And you want to be with this person. If we go back to the analogy of the arch, an arch is a beautiful structure. It's a very strong structure, but each individual pillar has to be separate. It has to stand alone within its own strength in order to put an arch over the top. And if you're too close, there's nothing, the arch isn't an arch. The pillars are kind of like joined together. That's not an arch.
That's
and if
brilliant.
you're too far apart, the arch falls in.
I do want to talk about attraction. And I want to talk about sexuality to begin with. It's a big topic for all teenagers as they find themselves attracted to the opposite and sometimes the same sex. And they can begin trying to define their sexuality. And again, I've done a bit of work on this, and I'm sure you've done, endless work on this. And I just keep coming back to the notion that in our teen years, we can be attracted to same sex as well as opposite sex. But this doesn't necessarily define our sexuality. But there is a lot of pressure on this topic. Really, I think, particularly when you're in the space yourself, as a teenager, as a teen girl in particular. Talk to us about this. Is it important to know sexuality in your teens? And what role does it play in your identity?
Again, I thought it would have to be an individual instinct, to think through that. I'm thinking of a client who was asking those questions at 15 and wasn't sure, and it was about helping her to feel okay with the fact that she wasn't sure. Because whether we're talking about sexuality or whether we're talking about other aspects of our personality and who we are, I work with clients from the age of sort of 6 or 7 right the way up to 70. And some of those clients in their 60s or even older are asking the questions that are new to them. Even though you would think maybe all through their life they would have come to know themselves and they would be certain about things, they're not. They're asking those questions of who they are very late in life. So it isn't just teenagers that would be unsure and would be experiencing things for the first time and not sure of exactly who they are and about their sexuality necessarily.
Yeah, I think it's a very important point you make, because I do think there is this belief that I need to know and I define myself, right now. I need to wave a flag about it.
It's that first need, again, that first emotional need is certainty. So whenever I hear somebody who's very, very certain, I wouldn't want to disagree with them because that's how they feel. But it would say to me that is really, when I said about love or fear again, is that about them feeling very empowered and very positive about who they are? Or is it about that fear of not wanting to be uncertain? It's almost the fear of, I have to know, I have to be sure. So I'm just going to be really sure, even though perhaps on the inside they're not really sure, but they feel that fear of uncertainty, that fear of not knowing is more frightening than the fear of saying, this is who I am.
Right.
But then later on they might say, my goodness me, why was I so apparently sure when underneath I wasn't really sure, but I needed to appear sure, so I did.
Yeah.
Because it was too frightening to say I don't know.
Right. So, I mean, this does lead to the question of, being as certain as you can. I mean, whatever your feelings are inside, but you feel like you think you know. But is there any value at that point saying, yes, this is who I am?
If we're sure, and if we feel it's as I sort of put it, kind of a love decision rather than a decision based on fear, then I would say yes, because, stepping into who we really feel we are is the place that we want to be going to, that authenticity. And that's, again, I talk to people of every age that are still wrestling with that are still saying, I can't actually say to my parents or certain people in my, in my life how I really feel or what I really believe. And that could be in all sorts of aspects. And it is that sense of sort of liberation that gradually we can be more genuine, because that's its self-acceptance. And then kind of saying, we're never going to have acceptance from everyone, but we do need to have acceptance of ourselves and present authentically as we can.
It's very, very difficult space for any teenager, but particularly we're talking about teenage girls. So if a teenage girl decides they're certain about it, how do girls talk to their parents, guardians about these feelings that might challenge religious traditions and so on?
As a relationship counsellor, I'm often looking for kind of creative ways of expressing who we are, and that could be I've written a letter, that so that whether that's a partner or parent, and I've expressed everything I want to say, and I'd like you to read it, and then I'd like to talk about it afterwards. Or I've brought a friend here, and I want that support of somebody who's going to help me talk about this. I wouldn't want anyone listening to think, yeah, you're going to have to make a big statement and plan it in the diary and sit down and have this big discussion, and often one of the easiest ways actually is on a journey in the car. So I just want to share this with anyone listening, is often when you're side by side, kind of metaphorically or literally traveling in the same direction, it's easier to have side by side conversations often, because you are on that sort of metaphorical or literal journey and saying, I just wanted to have a chat about something quite difficult. So.
Yeah, it's a really tough subject. There's been lots of television shows done around it and lots of talk around it, but it will become easier over time, because I think the important thing is going back to the relationships, is being able to have a relationship with the persons in your life where there's trust and there's somewhat openness, but also in relationship there are boundaries.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, can we talk about that a little bit? Because I think that in general we just talk about teenage sex, for example, as if it's sort of a rite of passage, that when everybody becomes a teenager, because of the intense feelings and because of the emotions and because of dating, that it's just going to lead sort of naturally. But I'd really like to just talk about the emotional aspect of it. We can talk about the physical aspect of it too. I feel like there's so much information out there about it. Can you talk to us a little bit about the value of educating our teens, in particular about sex?
Yes, well, in particular, I've just written down the word responsibility. And I think education, that's where it's going to help us to take responsibility for our decisions. Because again, no matter what issue people come to me with in terms of their relationships, I actually spend quite a lot of time unpicking what they're responsible for and what they're not. Because what I'll see a lot of the time is, but I feel like this because they did that. Or, I have to act like this because you act this way. And I'll be trying to unpick, just hang on a second, we are always responsible for actually our own emotions at the end of the day. We do have to take responsibility for how we feel, how we act, what we think, how we behave. We can't say, I did it, unless someone's, actually abusing us and making us do something. We are always responsible for what we do. And education plays a big part in that. I am responsible for how I'm going to behave in this relationship. I'm responsible for making my own boundaries and deciding where they are, deciding what I choose to do. As I say, I wouldn't, if then someone came to me years sort of down the line and said, we're in a mess with our relationship sort of thing, it would be part of my role to kind of say, at what point did you say that you gave that responsibility away to someone else? Like, why did you feel that became that they made you? Did they make you? Or you actually abused, and that comes into the sort of the dark topic of abuse, that can be very relevant, and that becomes, if somebody is saying to anyone listening, of course I'm jealous, of course I need to know what you're doing and who you're speaking to, because if I don't, you're making me feel, jealous and not good enough. It's kind of like, hang on a minute, that's actually a form of control and emotional control. You are not responsible for how their jealousy and how they feel. You're only responsible for who you are and what you're doing. It's back to that. I mean, I know that's a different topic, but it's a very...
No, it's a really good point. It's a really good point, because I think that it really correlates with taking responsibility for making decisions about whether you're ready to be sexually active or not. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about objectification a little bit. We've got, quite a bit of that with both boys and girls, but I do think that because of sexism, that it happens disproportionately with girls, and it's so elusive and, insidious. What can girls do to reject objectification with reference to dating? How can they enjoy being young, soak up the latest trends and so on without being stereotyped?
I think that will always be there. And again, I guess my instinct on this is that it's a day-to-day question. It's a day-to-day conversation to have with yourself and others, and to try to own your own space and your own individual view of the world. That being objectified tells us absolutely nothing about ourselves and everything about those people that are choosing to look that way or to behave that way.
I think that what you're actually saying is it's nothing to do with you. It's the other person's problem, and they need to deal with it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this is one of my concerns, is that I do see, I hope it's not growing, but I worry that it is, in a kind of a more narcissistic society with the social media, with it all being about how I look and how I feel and how am I, and, whereas I think self-esteem is very important, but the way I describe self-esteem and healthy self-confidence is I'm okay, you're okay. We're all unique and we're all different, but we're all equal.
That's really good. I've got to ask you for some hot tips, but before I do that, I do want to go back and ask you a question about stereotypes and being bullied around sexuality. How do girls deal with the stereotypes, of being bullied? And sexuality is one thing, but there are other things. We've talked about some of these things, and bullying is a big problem.
Yes, and when I talk about these in workshops, one of the techniques that's very, very difficult to do, but if you hold your own, if you sort of say, that's your opinion of me, I have a different opinion of myself, and then you say something kind back, if possible, the way to kill kind of that relationship and bullying is to sort of say, is that I'm okay, you're okay. Is to have that standpoint, to say, I don't feel that way about myself. So it's holding that in your mind and saying, what are they afraid of? Again, stress is a question, it comes from fear. And so if they're kind of choosing to be angry and negative towards you, it tells you about what they're afraid of. And they're actually afraid, and they could be jealous of if somebody appears to be different, but they actually seem okay with their difference, they're okay with their sexuality. It's almost a threat to those that maybe have got their own questions, which means it's defining them and their fear. And what they're really saying is, I'm not as confident as you, and I don't know how you're doing that. And wow. So instead of having the courage to say, gosh, wow, I really admire you, instead that bully that's actually a small, frightened person says, pokes fun. Oh, yeah, go look at you. You're, says something horrible. So then the stronger person will say, yeah, I'm all right with myself, actually. And you know what? You're okay too. Like, look at you. You've got these skills and you're tall and you're good looking. Good for you. And the bully does not know what to do with that. And that's why I kind of teach anti-bullying techniques, because it's very, very difficult. But that is, at the end of the day, kind of owning our truth and saying, I'm sorry, but that tells me about you. It doesn't tell me anything about me. So that's okay.
That's really good. So before we get out of here, I think it's so key. We've talked a lot about learning a lot about yourself. And I also think dating can be fun. It sounds very complex and intense, but it's a fun opportunity to learn a lot about yourself. And before we get out of here, can you offer our girls some hot tips on getting the best out of dating?
Well, I think what's coming to mind is an analogy I like to share, that if we've talked a lot about maybe the fears and the pitfalls and the uncertainties, and if you think about the analogy of a hot air balloon, so the basket of a hot air balloon is kind of like our insecurities and our fears. It can be a very heavy basket, but it's very small in relation to this great, big, amazing balloon that's going to lift up that heavy basket and float off into the rest of its life. So I like to think of it like that we need to acknowledge the heavy basket at times. I have a lot of clients having to return to dating later in life, and it's full of fear. It's full of, I don't want to go back there. I remember how hard that was in my teenage years, and I don't want to do that again. And the way to reframe that is to say, we have so much more life to live. There's so much more that we can learn and discover, and maybe it doesn't have to be so frightening. Maybe it can be seen as something joyous. As long as we bear in mind the risks, we can also have an awful lot of fun and a lot of joy. Yes.
And it goes back to one of the things that you originally said, and it's about being in that space and understanding that every day is a journey, every day.
Yeah, and I think one of the top tips I thought about as well is to journal that, is to write that down. I know one of your other guests talked about the journals she wrote and then turned into a book, and I thought that was lovely, and that really helps us with our emotional awareness as well, and to learn and to see that this isn't an end goal, this is a journey. And if you'll sort of document all the things you're learning and all the things that are going into that balloon analogy, all the things I've found out in this, when relationships come to an end, it gives us a way of looking back and looking at all the things that we've learnt, rather than just focusing on, well, it ended and now I feel sad. But what about what was happy and what was joyous?
That's amazing. It's all very good stuff, Kat. Thank you so much for joining us on UIO, and it's been a really good show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
That is a wrap for UIO on Dating Inside Out. Great show with lots of insight from Kat Williams. Thank you, girls, for listening, and thank you, God, for the opportunity to do the show. Today, I want to pray about putting dating into perspective, seeing it as an opportunity to learn about getting to know yourself, relating to others, including understanding boundaries, trust, and respect, for example, and taking responsibility. I pray that girls will enjoy the teen space they're in, keep it light, and keep it fun for happier and healthier relationships now and in the future. I ask these blessings in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. UIO Podcast will have more exciting podcasts coming up soon. We'll talk to you about that off air. Meanwhile, hit me up on Twitter at Sonja Lewis, Instagram at Sonja D. Lewis, Facebook on thisandthat.co.uk/UIO-podcast. Tell me what you want to hear about on UIO, and keep sending those questions on any of the episodes. Take care of you inside out, and remember, it is UIO.